Welcome back to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. On today's show, we have John Hamilton. He is an accomplished sales executive with over a decade of experience leading growth and driving profitability in the energy services and lighting industries. Currently Vice President of ESCO Sales at SLG Lighting, John is responsible for creating value within the ESCO market space by developing innovative products and solutions that address the needs of energy services companies. In his role, John is focused on expanding SLG's market share and ensuring long-term success of the ESCO channel, providing strategic leadership in sales management, account development, and product delivery. But before we get to him, Greg Eric, we got to go to slgus.com. What a coincidence.
That works, doesn't it? We do
It
have to
does.
go there, and you have to understand what they have to offer and bring to the table. And one category that they're awesome at is high bays, LED high bays specifically. So I'll give you an example. I had a project that I was working on. Customer had a variety of ceiling heights from 10 foot up to 30, and they wanted around 15,000 lumens up to 30,000 lumens, but they wanted the same fixture. Try to find that. I challenge you to find that. You know who's got it? SLG right here. I'm looking at it. It's 14,800 lumens to 30,500 lumens in one fixture, 100 watt up to 210, selectable color, 4K, 5K. It's even got a nice prismatic lens for their low glare. That's their HEC G2 high bay. That's just one of them. I'm telling you, finding something like that when no one else has it, SLG is the ticket. Right, John?
slgus.com. I
Yeah,
got to
Michael, I
say,
appreciate
one thing
that.
I know, yeah, one thing I noticed about SLG is that all their guys are cool. They're all cool cats. So go check out the cool cats of lighting at slgus.com. Of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, they're members. Greg and I are members. Why aren't you a member? Do you have light bulbs in a warehouse? Do you have light fixtures in a warehouse? Do you sell them over a counter? Do you sell them on Amazon, over the internet, on the phone, in the field? If you do that, you should be a member of the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. And of course, Greg, don't be a chump, buddy. See
I'm
you in
not.
Vegas.
You're not. Vegas, May
No,
5th through the 8th, something like that, right around there. Light fair. You got to get there.
don't be a chump, man. Go to
Yes,
Light
sir.
Fair. John, welcome to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So
So
I'm going
we're
to
gonna
kick it
have a
off,
big
Mike. If
ESCO
that's
party.
okay.
Okay,
Yeah, that's what I
okay,
wanted to
okay.
do. Was have an ESCO party because it's one of these terms. It's a broad term that I've heard over the years, and I think I know what it means, but I'm not really sure sometimes because I'm like, am I an ESCO? Is Mike an ESCO? Is he
Yeah,
an ESCO? What's an ESCO? Start there.
yeah, and it's often a term that's stretched to make it used when people want to use it. But the simplicity of an ESCO is an energy service company. Anybody who is financing a project based on performance contracting is the most simplest way to put it, right? So they are usually doing multi phases, so including everything from solar to wind turbines to lighting. The whole purpose is to reduce the energy footprint of that building or that campus. And they use contracts that are based on the reduction of energy, right? So they'll monitor and verify for 7 to 20 years after the contract's implemented to make sure that that energy has been reduced. And that reduction in energy is how they get compensated. So currently in this environment, I would say most of the federal and most of the large MUSH, which stands for municipalities, universities, schools, and hospitals, most of the projects going on in those sectors are being spearheaded by energy service companies. So it's a term that's often usually massaged and used for contractors or anybody who's reducing energy in this world, right? You and I are also part of that world, but in particular, unless you are doing performance contracting, you're not really an energy service company. And then even going a little deeper than that, there are some layers of qualifications, right? So the Department of Education, or the Department of Energy, excuse me, has a list of about 120 to about 200 approved ESCOs that they have vetted and include on their list available for projects.
So to sum it up, you have to be paid by performance, and you have to do more than lighting, and then you can be an ESCO.
Yeah, I mean the basis of it. I mean, I think the actual terminology. I mean, I'll read you a definition, Mike, Greg, just so we can have that on the table. I've given you
Yeah.
my 2 cents, but in essence, and ESCO acts as a project developer as they integrate the project's design, the financing, and the installation and operational elements. And then the project contract terms can typically range between 7 and 20 years, depending on the types of measures installed. And the main differentiator between ESCOs and other types of energy efficiency contractors is the guarantee of energy savings, which is typically specified as part of the terms of the performance contract, right? So they'll enter a contract with a large university and say, for the next 20 years, we're going to reduce X amount of kilowatts, and we're going to go ahead and measure that and verify that. And that's done through a number of measures. It used to be, lighting was the definitely low-hanging fruit and the one that kind of financed the majority of the rest of the projects. But I would say in the last, 24 months, it's been shifted to a majority of EV charger installations and solar installations and wind turbines. There's even things like battery energy storage, solar PV, just anything that can reduce the footprint of that building.
Has an ESCO ever gone out of business?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. A lot of these ESCOs are financially, they're privately held, and they're usually financially backed by large organizations. And what's interesting is that a number of our large domestic ESCOs are actually financed by foreign entities, right? Which disallows them from doing the federal contracts. But yeah, I mean, just like any large insurance company, any large entity, if they're not financially careful and capable, they definitely can go out of business and have.
It was kind of a joke, but it was also like, okay, so you're getting paid on 20-year performance, and then you're gone in 2 years. What happens those 18 years? Schools or whatever site that signed up for it is scot free. There for their system, they don't have to pay anything for it.
Typically, no. These contracts are reinsured, and that's why when the government vets out their 120, 115 DOE approved ESCOs, a lot of that is considered, right? They're not going to let somebody in who doesn't have the financial backing, the history, the bonding, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's the actual number is about 120 that are allowed.
Yeah, I think the list changes every year. I just looked at it, I think it's called, and I think the number was 121 approved ESCOs. And what's interesting is there's some companies on that list, I think, that have, massaged the terminology and gotten themselves approved. And like we all do, right? We all find a niche where we can add some value and help out.
So the what I'm seeing a lot of right now, and this is may be like negative on the ESCO boys out there, but whatever. It's Michael Call again on Get a Grip on Lighting. Everybody already hates me anyway, so I might as well get the ESCOs on board here. But one of the things I'm starting to resent is all these barriers to entry to sell to people. It seems like more and more and more and more there's these lists or programs or special treatments and this kind of stuff that's going on at various government levels. And the essential push for these types of programs is to ensure that the company is solid and that but these just seem like paperwork factories where you fill out paperwork or whatever. The ESCO game, I think, is probably the most that way of all of these types of industries. Does this vetting by the DOE actually work, or is it really just a way to keep it within a certain club of people? There's a tough
I
question
think it
for you.
works. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it works from the perspective of if the vetting wasn't there, right? I don't know what type of a situation we could have, right? I mean, if out here in California, 10, 15 years ago when they rolled out rebate programs through PG&E, there was a number of contractors that were taking advantage of the programs, right? They would go out and dump pallets of lights on a hotel's parking lot and say, hey, you screw them in the ceiling and we've done our job, right? So I think if there wasn't a process of vetting, I think there would be some opportunities for some companies to get involved in this process that weren't doing it above board, right? Weren't doing it with the taxpayers' dollars and the customer in mind. And I don't think, Mike, that it's really prohibitive. I don't think it's keeping anybody from getting the work done. I think if you are I think if you add value in this space, whether that be just doing simple lighting retrofits, or if you have, the ability to go out and do, window filming or some type of building envelope aspect, I think that, there is an opportunity for you to get involved. So I don't think the vetting has slowed it down as much. I think it's maybe kept it from being, the wild, wild west in some aspects, which I think, we all can appreciate.
Yeah, I don't
Does
think I
he?
appreciate it.
Oh,
I take a different perspective. I'm seeing massive overregulation in the Ontario lighting
Okay.
market, where there's certainly not the presumption of why this is being done and what's actually happening are two totally different realities. And so I always question these kinds of lists and vetting and who's getting vetted and what's the vetting for, and do the people in the government, after vetting people, go work for those companies? That happens a lot in the United States, actually, in a lot of different sectors. So not that I'm taking it up with the ESCOs, but I think there's too much of this in this industry, and I see it in a lot of different areas, and I'm wondering if that is a situation in the ESCO space. Nonetheless, there's lots of business to be had there. How does SLG, when you say I'm in the ESCO space, how do you serve the needs of those particular companies? So you go to them with a lighting package. Are you doing the design? Are you helping them in the sales channel? Describe to me what it's like to work with ESCOs.
Yeah. To answer that question, it's a great question, and I think it's probably primarily one of the reasons I found myself in my way to SLG. Right, I had been in the industry for about 15 years, serving ESCOs and their large super subcontractors, and what I saw was a need for, quite honestly, Greg and Michael, some simplicity, right, some velocity. ESCOs typically, they either invest in their own lighting design team, where they have the knowledge and the expertise on what lighting is and what they should specify, what they should include in their projects, or they don't, right? Or the ESCO does not have an internal design team and they rely on the
Hmm.
contractors that they hire and or the vendors that they bring onto their projects to bring that expertise. And so I think what really attracted me to SLG was first and foremost the ability to be that U-boat in the ocean as opposed to an aircraft carrier, right? A lot of times we will be asked for things that require us to be very actionable, very quick. If you are a company that slows things down and takes 2 or 3 weeks to turn around a design, or even 2 or 3 weeks to get an answer back on a question like, "Hey, SLG, we are looking at doing a project where we need to incorporate X, Y, and Z into your fixtures. Is that something that you are willing to incorporate?" And oftentimes in situations like that, there are UL classifications, there's new DLC classifications, there's new testing that has to be done. So on top of just the hustle, there's cost. And so I think working with a manufacturer that understands this, they understand the need to be flexible on both the pre and post sales end, right? Because oftentimes ESCOs are working on projects where they didn't do the audit. Okay, somebody else did the audit 3 or 4 years ago, and they got to the building and realized, hey, I didn't need 800 of these, I only needed 750. SLG, are you going to take these back without any pushback, right? So just designing the easy button is really what I was looking for, right? A company that didn't have any anchors in the water, right? We're not a company that's been financially hemorrhaging from a horticulture line or for a hazardous location line that we invested in years ago, right? So somebody that understands the complexities of projects as well, Michael, right? So when an ESCO or a contractor is facing liquidated damages of $500 a day if they don't get off the job by December 31st, it's really hard for them to stomach a manufacturer who all of a sudden just gave away half of their product, right? Or who had to push it out the door to pay some bills early in November, knowing that those fixtures are supposed to be saved for a project in January. So just being cognizant of how these ESCOs and subcontractors work. Also, as a manufacturer, looking for the right distributor partners makes a ton of difference. Finding those partners that can facilitate and operate the same ways that I just mentioned from a manufacturer perspective
Hmm.
is who I'm trying to align with, so that we can again bring that easy button to the table, right? And that's a big part of what we do. So again, if they don't have the lighting design team adding that expertise, we have the ability to do the design, we have the ability to actually go out and do audits. But I think it really just matters on, where they are in the project, what type of project they're getting involved in, and just having the ability to be flexible to accommodate, I think is really where we've had our success.
You touched on it a little bit there. You mentioned the role of the distributor. Are they bringing value, or are they just passing through?
Mhm.
If you're given all the information, you're given the design, you're talking to the ESCO, and I'm going to sell them the stuff, what do I do? Just say, how much should I put on this? Pass it through? Where's the value?
Greg, sometimes it can be that simple. Sometimes it can be that simple. And if it is that simple, then there isn't a whole lot of value, right? I mean, we're talking about energy service companies who large and, the majority of ESCOs are large financial entities, right? With the financial
Mhm.
banking or financial backing, equal to a large distributor, right? So typically it's not even that they need a bank or they need somebody to come in and provide terms. Really, where the role of distributor comes into play for an ESCO is twofold, right? One is I'm a manufacturer that produces quite a bit that goes on that bill of materials, but there's always going to be something I don't produce, right? So for me to work in conjunction with that ESCO, I need to bring in a distributor that can supply all of the other stuff that I don't supply, right? And maybe even there's some stuff that I do supply, but I'm just not doing it the best, or I just don't have the best product for that particular application. Obviously, a distributor is going to come in and find and source those materials. So that's one, right? Providing one throat to choke is the way I call it on a big project. It makes a lot of sense and it adds a ton of value. And then the second step that they really add value is oftentimes, in a location, right? If an ESCO is out in Maryland and they're doing a project in California, right? They need feet on the street, they need some staging, they need brick and mortar, they need a building. So there's oftentimes where, more than just, putting a number, Greg, or going out and finding something they don't have. It's actually helping project manage. Because again, the back end on these projects is really where they either, it works or it doesn't, right? And that really comes down to it. Once it leaves my dock and gets on a truck, if it's not going to your brick and mortar location, and if it's going drop ship, who chases that down, right? Who stays on top of all of these shipments, right? So even if we're not using a distributor from a brick and mortar location perspective, and they're just being a pass through, there's still a lot of value that can be added. The third thing I didn't mention, and this really comes in probably on the federal side more than on the MUSH side, is just being an expert, right? So yes, they may have a lighting design team. They know, what a high bay, and they know what a door kit is, but they don't know who has BA material. They don't know who has BA material, right? So in our world, in today's world, with the federal perspective, there's a huge requirement for those things, TAA material as well. So having a distributor that they can turn to and say, hey, Greg, everything that you bring me, I know that it's truly going to be a BAA. I know you've done your vetting of those manufacturers before you brought them to me. And or just, hey, don't bring me manufacturers that are tough to work with on the back end, because when I'm chasing this stuff down, it can be a headache. So I think there's a ton of value that can be added, but I think you hit it on the head. If an ESCO or if a distributor is just trying to get involved because they heard of a project and want to put a few points on it, I don't think there's a whole lot of value there.
I'm going to bring back a blast from the past here, Greg. You ready for this?
Good.
You haven't heard
Yeah.
this one in a while.
Mm.
What's the difference between an ESCO and lighting as a service? Remember, lighting as a service was going to take over?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What's the difference?
There's not a whole lot, right? I've got some
Mm.
contractors out here in California that are working the Pacific Gas and Electric program, right? So no longer are there rebates just available if you put in an LED light bulb, right? But there are rebates available if you work with a third-party engineer and you can show an energy reduction, right? And so that reduction in energy is a reduction in your energy bill, right? So instead of paying PG&E 10 grand a month, you're going to pay 5 grand a month. And the difference in that reduction in energy gets paid to the ESCO. So whether you're a contractor or an energy service company working that type of space, it's very, very similar.
How do ESCOs calculate the increased cost of energy into their calculations? Do they get the extra money from the increased cost of a kilowatt hour? Does that go to them, or is it set at a kilowatt hour rate from the date of installation, and they only get that plus the energy savings? Or do they get the extra money on the increased energy cost?
So they're going to get paid on the delta, right? So if they can reduce it more than they even came into the project assuming they would, they're going to capture that savings, right? So they're going to get paid on the savings. And usually, typically, these contracts are 20 to 25 years, right? And so then you start to come into this when lighting is involved. You start to come into the balance of, okay, you're giving me a 5 to 10 year warranty on a 20 to 25-year project, right? So that's why, as a manufacturer, we are almost always looking at 10-year warranties when we're looking at ESCO projects, and or even looking for ways to help comfort them, right, when they know that they're extended for that many years. But yeah, they're definitely compensated on the difference in that delta.
Are ESCOs heavy into the network lighting controls? Is that sort of coming along with them right now?
It's not been, ESCOs are completely generated by return on investment, right? And so from them, aesthetics, neat stuff, the ability to control just above and beyond what you needed to do has never been there. I will tell you on the sports lighting side, what's been interesting is the controls have been, and I think we had a conversation, I know you had a conversation with Royce about this a few weeks ago, but that's where you're starting to see, hey, listen, I want them to flash, I want the RGB, I want the fun stuff because I'm used to seeing that on television. So you are starting to see a push for that, even in energy contracts where sports lighting typically hasn't penciled out. It's starting to be kept in the projects because it's the pretty, lipstick on the end of the project, right? The community doesn't see the new boiler and chiller. They do see the sports lighting. Just from a controls perspective, it's been very challenging to get ESCOs or super subcontractors to really buy into controls unless it was code driven, right? Unless it was demanded for the project. It was never something that somebody was trying to include on a project. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is just inability, right? The knowledge, just lack of knowledge on really how to sell it and how to add value with it. Also, just kind of staying away from it where they could, because there's always commissioning issues. There could be commissioning issues. So really, they've adopted it, Michael, over the last couple of years where it's been implemented, and then you're seeing utility companies require it, right? So you're starting to see, as part of these projects, a requirement come through that they must have network lighting controls, or there must be at least some type of sensor. And I'm starting to see some pretty advanced controls on these projects as well. So even as going down to your Air Force warehouse or Air Force hangar where they're building, engines, they're starting to implement controls as well. So it's taken some
Yeah,
time. It's definitely been the slowest to adopt, but it's there. It's coming on.
yeah, it's interesting that where it matters when you're being paid from the actual energy savings, the companies have steered clear of it unless there are other motivations involved. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people we've seen the controls boom bust cycle happen many times is because it's actually quite difficult to show the savings from controls. It's very difficult after you've
Mm-hmm.
reduced the wattage substantially. Whether you're going from T12 to T8 or you're going from T5 HO to LED or whatever, that's a provable saving. The lighting controls, some of them are really good, but a lot of areas it's just very difficult to capture savings, and if it's not commissioned properly, sometimes the lights stay on even more than they should. So, yeah, it's interesting that the ESCOs
Exactly.
are not so hot on controls. I love the one throat to choke, Greg. That's a great line.
That is a good one. Um, one question I have
Fortunately,
about
it was
this whole
used on
thing.
me a number of times.
You're the throat. Um, does the end user, I know what your answer might be, but I think about it, the end user, do they overpay by working with an ESCO? If they're saying I got to
Mm.
do my lighting with my window, with my HVAC, with my whatever, are they paying more than they should?
Hmm.
I think the answer to that question is, these bids are typically, if it's a federal bid, right, they've got to go out and get multiple bids, right? So they try to drive cost competitiveness into it as much as they can. But I think your answer and your interpretation is pretty right on, right, Greg? So if I was a lighting contractor and I went in and knocked on that door and all I wanted to do was retrofit your lighting, I could probably be a little more nimble, sharpen the pencil. There could probably be a little bit better spend of every dollar in that application. But that being said, a number of these projects that are being spearheaded by ESCOs that include all these different phases are an excellent opportunity for that university or that VA hospital or that federal entity to get to take advantage, right? And unfortunately, in the old environment, the past administration, there was a lot of federal dollars. You know, the Inflation Reduction Act. There was a lot of incentives that were coming from the federal government to go out and retrofit buildings. In the new administration, while I think it's going to be good for the economy, and I think it's going to be very good for the private sector, there's not going to be a whole lot of federal push, right? So the federal funding is not going to be there for things like LED retrofits. But what's really good, like I said, is that these ESCOs are privately held. So what I think the takeaway from this is, as a taxpayer sitting here waiting for, I guess, maybe the government to go in and retrofit and reduce energy. While that's been on hold for many reasons, including the amount of federal employees that went, home for COVID and never came back, I think the private sector is going to have a huge injection. And I think as a taxpayer, it's good to know that the private sector is out there hustling and reducing this footprint, because we're up against it, right? In California and across the country, we're going to start to be plugged in from electrification, right? We're going to have a number of, whether it be federal fleet vehicles, or in California, it's even your commercial or your own vehicle has to be electric. And we just don't have the infrastructure to support that. So one of the best ways to get into a good position is to reduce the load, right? One story I go ahead and tell you guys, because I heard this a while back, and is lighting guys, we rarely have a chance to feel proud about what we do, right? Or I guess too proud. But that being said, had a chance to hear Admiral Lloyd, who was the head of the TSA. So when 9/11 happened and the TSA was created, Admiral Lloyd was put in place from President Clinton, and his first task was to reduce energy. And we had him out at an event that we did in New Jersey, actually as part of a light fair, and he did a good speech. And it was the first time I heard him tell about, the number one time when the military is in jeopardy of being killed is when they're actually going for refueling, right? So typically somebody has to leave the party and go and refuel, and it's during that time that they get either run over an IUD or they get attacked. And so his whole interpretation was, every LED light bulb that we can retrofit, right, is allowing us to reduce energy, and it's going to stop us from having to make one more refueling when we're out on the battlefield, right? So his whole interpretation is, for every light bulb that we retrofit to LED here domestically, we're saving lives on the battlefield. Which, I don't know how far we can stretch that story, but I think it does. When I'm get up and go to work every day, that's one thing that I like to think about, is that I'm doing my part, right, for the country.
Yeah, mitigation has its limits, though. And we have to be careful that we're not trying to mitigate our way out of everything. Sometimes you need real clean energy that you can use as much of it as you want. I mean, this starving for energy situation that's happening in California. I mean, you got a whole bunch of bombs about to explode there. You got AI, you got electric vehicle legislation, you got all this sort of stuff. You don't have any nuclear power plants. I got news for you guys. You got big trouble there. I think you got one. So I think, some of this, hey, the electrification thing is great. I got nothing against electrification. I think that we have to stop mitigating and start finding ways to create clean energy, so we can clean, cheap energy, so we can use as much of it as we want. But Greggy, we got to hats off to the cool cats at slgus.com, buddy.
That's right. There they are. We talked about their high bays at the beginning. They have a lot more than that, but I'm telling you, not all high bays are the same. You can't just slap the same thing everywhere. Sometimes you got a lot of back to the old days where you used to actually have to think through what you were doing. Different high bays, different optics, different lenses, different sizes, sensors, nothing, color, lumen output. They've got it all.
I got it all. SLG.
100%.
Sorry, I got to get this website right here. I'd make sure I got it. They're new to us. slgus.com. Pretty simple. Culligan forgot. I'm sick. Give me a break. Of course, SLG is a new member of the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. You got light bulbs in a warehouse, light fixtures in a warehouse, buddy? You got them in a warehouse. You sell them over a counter. Nailed is where it's at, buddy. Now, NALD.org. Of course, we got our lighting controls course coming out at motivation. Reggie, don't be a loser, buddy. Come on. Where are you going to be in May?
Get to
Vegas?
Light Fair. Get to Light
Get
Fair.
to
Got to
Light
go to
Fair.
Vegas. Got to go to
Come
Light
on,
Fair.
man. Let's go. Get down to Light Fair. Register. I'm not going to give out the website. You know how to find Light Fair. It's easy. It's been around forever. You get a grip on lighting, listeners. We thank John for coming on the show today and talking about ESCOs. He took a little heat there in the middle, but he battled through. It was awesome. We'll go with another props out to slgus.com and see you guys next time. Bye for now.